Tak dobré odpoledne všem.
Okay, so good afternoon.
Now, for those, pro ty, kteří nemohou nebo nerozumí tolik anglicky, nebo by chtěli podporu, máme tady teďka na odpolední část překladatele, takže pokud máte potřebu, prosím, vyzvedněte si sluchátka tamhle vzadu u dveří a proto tady jsou. Ale v zásadě budeme pokračovat v rytmu takovém, že většina z účastnic stejně preferuje komunikaci v angličtině, včetně našeho prvního hosta teďka na odpoledne, profesora Jana Polívku z Technické univerzity v Berlíně, který je zároveň ředitelem, a doufám, že to nespletu, Institutu vlastně městského a regionálního plánování v Berlíně, zároveň teda českého původu, nebo určitě by česky dneska mohl hovořit, ale předpokládám, že tu prezentaci bude mít v angličtině, tak uvidíme, jestli nás překvapí nějakými zajímavými vklady v češtině. Každopádně je mým velkým potěšením, že Jan přijal naši pozvání na tu dnešní debatu a rovnou mu vlastně předám slovo. Takže děkuji a floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So you will get some English with Czech accent. And from me, before the slides are coming, nice afternoon. Also from me, my name is Jan Polívka. I'm professor for urban planning and urban redevelopment at the TU Berlin University. We have an Institute of Urban and Regional Planning, now having 9 professorships. One of them is urban regeneration. It is one of the 9 schools of urban planning in Germany and one of 5 schools which are teaching also urban regeneration. In Germany, the urban regeneration in the location has some traditions, so maybe you have heard about the renovation of Berlin during the 70s and 80s with the international building exhibitions, and later, of course, the development after 1990s. This is one of the reasons why the professorship has been established or is still established in Berlin. I'm very happy to be here. Even though I was born and grew up in Prague, I switched to Berlin some 25 years ago, and the reason was easy. There was no urban planning studies by that time in Czech Republic. This is changing at the moment, so quarter century before maybe I would be studying here. So I'm very happy to be here. It's one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be here. Now maybe he is asking something that I would like to, yeah? Okay, and I would like to not to present my work as had been announced, because I will do that when we are having our pitches for the panels. I would like to go with you through the question how to tackle current planetary challenges by planning approaches. And I need to announce that I don't have an answer for that. I think if I would have, we wouldn't need these studies. But let me tackle at least 3 major challenges that I believe are very important when we are talking about urban planning and also the changes in our society. The first one is acceleration. I will explain them in a minute. So the society and the techniques are accelerating. The question is, how is actually planning reacting on that? The second one is growing disparities in the society, economically, also politically, and also globally. And the other one is the volatility of systems. So the changes and their effects on our systems, I call them, becoming volatile. The interesting point for me here is actually how planning is perceived in the perspective of these changes. And you probably might have heard that already. You can read it in the newspapers. That's also 3 very important points, saying that planning is too slow, so we need to speed up the planning. Planning is unjust, but mostly it is not meant as unjust to certain people. It is unjust to many areas of the society, but also many areas of the economy. You can also read or hear that planning is breaking down the speed of economic development, for example, even though it is a redistributive measure which is actually here to create justice in space. And the last one is the sentence saying that planning is unflexible because we are living in times which are very dynamic, and we have a still very linear and very rigid planning, and that's why we need to change it. So we keep in mind these 3 points. I will go through these points, and then maybe later in the panel we can discuss how far we have possibilities to change the planning according to these challenges, or maybe to withstand and say some points are important in planning and others may be alternative. So let's have a look into the planning as a settlement space management. And I am talking here about so-called planning regimes, because planning regimes are actually what is under discussion and the critiques. They are very different all over the world and also in Europe, but the most important thing about planning is actually that this is creating safety, it's providing infrastructure, and it's giving stability. And they are necessary for society in space and in the rules of development, but they are also necessary and important for growth. So societies which are having a very strong planning systems and very strong planning regimes are also societies with the highest development. Now we can talk about whether this is the hen and the egg, so what was the first and what was the second, but we can say that planning systems, when they are strong, when they are reliable, the development in the space and also the development in the societies are quite stable. It is often said that cities are the areas of the strongest economic development, and this is true. We are having the strongest economic development, especially in the very developed societies, are in the cities. And also in the underdeveloped societies, the most development in space, if we count it on the square meters, is in the cities, but this picture is working not only for the cities, it is working for the regions, it is working also for the countryside. Now, what is actually planning doing is watching or looking at the agglomeration costs, which are given, and giving the safety by raising the agglomerative benefits, as you can see them, and the very, very basic target for the planning is actually to even down the volatility in systems. So to have a very, very simple example, if it's cold in the winter, you are in a house, it's warm, and you need the infrastructure that the warmth is coming into your house. When it's hot or when it's raining, then you know the rainwater is going through the gutter, and or other things like the provision of fireproofings, like the provision of health, the provision of other infrastructures, are all given by the very basics of urban planning and planning engineering, but also the planning is targeting topics like regulation of markets or in order to tackle inequality, for example. And nowadays we are often talking, for example, for the mitigation of climate effects. So this is where the volatility of the systems that we know, the climate system, the financial systems, the societal systems, the housing systems, many different systems are actually being tackled by the urban planning, whether this is formal or informal. This brings the settlement areas on the trajectory of the agglomeration benefits. And the agglomeration benefits are actually what is producing our health. So Jane Jacobs fought the narrative in 1950s against saying that the countryside is actually the old area where people live. And then it developed into cities, and cities are wealthy. She said, basically, all the worlds are existing parallelly, but the city is, because of the agglomeration benefits, is actually a completely different area of living space, because it is working on standardization, productivity, and consume on a very, very narrowed space. And for the narrowed space, we need rules, and the rules are provided by the society, by the economy, by the politics, but in terms of space, they are provided by urban design and urban planning. Now, what happens when we are creating conditions which are safe, stable by urban planning? They accelerate the growth. They accelerate the development. And that's the hen and egg connex. So when we are accelerating the conditions, we are bettering the conditions for development, then we are accelerating the growth. One example for that is the steam engine, because steam engine, as many, many other things have been developed in the countryside, not in the city, but they have been implemented in the cities, and then they contributed to the growth. So what is actually modern planning doing in modern planning regimes? It is providing a linear and equal development framework by predictable and laminar growth. So it is redistributing the growth in many areas of the cities. It also says that it's redistributing the growth not only in the cities, but also in the regions and the countrysides. And it is a scale-based expanding pattern. So it is basically saying if we are growing, we are doing it on scales, and we are expanding. Also the planning actually in space is expanding or expansion generated model. How does it work in the very classic modern planning that I learned, that I am teaching, and that you probably already heard about? Well, the first thing is actually that we have a predictable and linear development, okay? So if I take the very famous paragraph 5 from the German planning law, it's saying the zoning plan is giving an intended urban development for a foreseeable needs of the municipality and for the entire municipal territory. So it's actually a very comprehensive plan which is saying in a period of this time, these things, A, B, C, D, will have to happen. Now, if we have a linear growth, if we have a linear development, it is very easy to plan in this way. Second point, rational serial order. So when you remember the Athens Charter of 1933, the Modernity Charter, it is basically saying that if we are switching our cities completely into the process of scaling, that they will be even more effective, they will be more fast, and they will be more just. This is actually what the Charter of Athens is saying. The third point is, it's in a scale-based expansive spatial pattern. That's what I have already said. And it is connected to an administrative understanding of the planning, which is also laminarly redistributed in government and governance. So we have, for example, for Germany, but you can take it for any other country here in Europe, we have the federal spatial policies, we have the state planning, we have regional planning, and we have communal zoning, if you want or like. And it is a top-down, bottom-up system, which is a kind of leveraging the interest on the different areas, different levels. The most important part is it is covering the whole country, the whole area, completely. It also means that the development is writing into the space by expansion. So if we look at the cities, as we have them after 150 years of modern times of industrialization, they have been constantly growing. And they are even growing in a post-industrial time, even in areas and even in countries.
Dokonce i v zemích, ve kterých populace ubývá, se města rozšiřují. Směrem do prostoru je to dáno ekonomickým růstem, ale také zajišťováním infrastruktury a dalších výdobytků v prostoru, ve společnosti. I přesto, že se počet obyvatel snižuje, ale ekonomický růst pokračuje. Skrze toto lze města takzvaně nejenom rozšiřovat, ale i replikovat. Ještě před 250 lety byl Berlín velmi malé město. Setkalo se s parním strojem, který přišel z Holandska a z Anglie. Byl tedy importován do Německa a setkal se s levnou pracovní silou z východní Evropy. V rámci pruského Pruské říše a stal se jedním z největších měst Evropy v té době. Města ale lze určitým způsobem replikovat, protože během druhé světové války došlo k zničení Berlína téměř kompletně. Nicméně tento vývoj ale také mění vzorce toho, jak se města rozvíjejí, ale také i krajina. Určitá archipelága v podstatě jsou ostroví, která se skládají z různých předměstí, regionů, venkova, jádra. Z tohoto pohledu se územní plánování podporuje společnost, ale také vytvořilo zcela nový koncept propojování nebo také přerušování v rámci prostoru. A dál, jaké jsou další systémové vlivy? Mám 4. První vliv je globalizace, ten nepotřebuji vysvětlovat, ale co vlastně globalizace dělá? Jeden z jejich efektů je, že dochází k silnější diferenciaci mezi periferií a centrem. Takže co vlastně v moderní době zažíváme, v dnešní industrializaci, jsou v podstatě změny v podmínkách života mezi lidmi uvnitř měst a mimo ně. A mění se to. Jsou zde o dost větší rozdíly v podmínkách života a z těchto grafů vyplývá, toto je jediný graf, který vám ukážu, slibuju, takže toto jsou změny v populaci v Německu. Červené křivky ukazují centrální oblasti, šedé křivky ukazují periferie daleko od měst. A jak vidíte, tak to obyvatelstvo se skutečně rozvětvuje, ale také zaměstnanost je velmi odlišná. Ve velkých městech máme stejný růst mezi populací a zaměstnaností, ale jak vidíte, zaměstnanost v menších městech, zelená je nižší, pak je ještě modrá linka, která je ještě níž, takže v oblastech, které nejsou centrální, skutečně schází příležitosti. A toto je samozřejmě výzva, kterou musí územní plánování řešit. Má-li být územní plánování spravedlivé, což je úplně něco jiného, než to bylo v těch moderních dobách. Dochází zde k velké polaritě. Tady vidíte další příklady z Německa. Máme zde růst, ale jenom v určitých bodech, v určitých místech. V moři poklesu, opaku od růstu, v oblastech po celém Německu. Malý spoiler, na pravé straně vidíte, jak fungují dotace v územním plánování. Takže když ty peníze, které plynou do těch nejslabších oblastí, což stále znamená, že se to soustředí do určité oblasti, v některých oblastech, ve všech těchto oblastech jsou šance velmi odlišné a stále se vlastně sobě navzájem vzdalují. Takže tímto způsobem klasické územní plánování, které vlastně přerozděluje peníze z velkých center do malých center, už naráží na své limity. Také vidíme, že tato koncepce nebo tento vývoj se zrychluje. Kdybyste se podívali na změny v populaci v Německu mezi rokem 1990 až 2010, což je obrázek nalevo, a rozdíl v populaci 2010 a 2030, tak je to opravdu odlišné. Takže se to vlastně výrazně zrychluje. Otázkou je, co s tím můžeme dělat z hlediska územního plánování, pokud ten vývoj napravo už nefunguje. Druhý vliv je neoliberalismus. Ten asi taky nemusím vysvětlovat, ale podívejme se, co dělá neoliberalismus s pravidly územního plánování a jeho chápání. První věc, plánování je příliš pomalé. Potřebujeme pravidla nějakým způsobem buď to zrušit, anebo zjednodušit. Za druhé, plánování je nespravedlivé. Musíme selektivně chránit určité věci a místa. A za třetí, nebo za druhé tedy plánování je nespravedlivé. V naší DNA to také máme, když to někdy dochází podpora do míst, která ji možná nepotřebují. Za třetí, plánování je neflexibilní. Když to jde ze státu přes regiony dolů do obcí, tak to není dostatečné a někdy zase se příliš spoléhá na soukromé vrstvy, na soukromé subjekty, na místo veřejné správy a čeká se, že to zařídí trh. Nicméně toto vlastně vykazuje ta omezení toho lineárního územního plánování. Tyto věci se dějí a propisují se do prostoru. Co to konkrétně znamená? Privatizujeme bydlení například a externalizujeme také náklady bydlení směrem ke společnosti, takže podporujeme sice nájmy, ale ty nájmy, ty peníze z těch nájmů plynou společnostem, velkým společnostem, které žijí mimo naše země. Dochází k růstu bohatství, ale nejenom mezi zeměmi a mezi venkovem a městy, ale i ve městech, v malých oblastech. Také jeden z největších problémů, které považuji za nedostatečně řešené, je kapitalizace zdrojů. A v prvé řadě je tedy, myslím, zdroj prostoru. Takže když mluvíme o bydlení a jak ho zjednodušit, tak čím víc stavíme, pokud to lidi nezaplatí, tak vlastně ztrácíme prostor na vytváření skutečného bydlení, které je potřeba pro běžné lidi. Takže kapitalizujeme ty zdroje, které ale jsou omezené, když vlastně prostor je zastavěný kompletně a už žádný není. Čtvrtá výzva, digitalizace. Malý kvíz. Jak dlouho trvalo, než se telefony dostaly do všech domácností v Evropě? Jak dlouho to trvalo televizi a jak dlouho to trvalo mobilu? 50 let? 30 let, 10 let. Když se bavíme o AI, tak dokonce to nevidíme ani jako křivku, co se týče domácností, protože už není žádné zařízení, žádná infrastruktura, která by to fyzicky podmiňovala, takže vlastně nevíme, jaké to pronikání umělé inteligence do populace je. A poslední výzva, teď se dostáváme právě k tomu tématu té nestálosti systému. V Německu mluvíme o 4K, když se podíváme na hodiny, které ukazují přibližování se soudného dne, tak dá se říct, že různé vlivy jsou sice zvenčí, ale čtvrtou výzvou je klimatická změna a takže nejde jenom o systémy, které lidé vytvořili, které jsou nestálé a nespolehlivé, jako digitalizace a globalizace, ale základ přírody, který se mění. To znamená, to je průměrná teplota na světě a další aspekty. Tuhle křivku zřejmě znáte, je velmi přesná. Takže co se vlastně děje? Do 80. let jsme měli nestálost v systémech, jeden z těch prvních slajdů. Tak fungovalo plánování, aby prostor byl obyvatelný v rámci toho nestálého prostoru. Ale to, co se děje nyní, je to, že teď jsou systémy sami o sobě nestálé a tím pádem je velmi obtížné řešit nějakým rozumným lineárním způsobem. Je obtížné říct, že za 20 let budeme potřebovat, aby bylo město naplánováno takto. Ani nevíme, jak bude v té době vypadat klima, nebo za 5-10 let také. Můžeme to zkoušet pomocí AI, pomocí politiky. Takže řešíme nestálost systémů. Jeden příklad, toto je projekce čili výhled pro Vietnam do roku 2050, kde nebude, pokud by nebyla žádná plánovací opatření. Oni upravili okolo roku 2020 si to porovnali, takže to je korekce toho výhledu. Tím chci říct, že je velmi obtížné předvídat nějaká opatření, když celý systém je velmi nestálý. Co se s tím dá dělat? Je to obtížná otázka a můžeme se o ní bavit. Už mám jenom 2 slajdy. A já to řeším se svými každodenními projekty tak, že na teoretické úrovni si myslím, že běžné plánování, konvenční plánování už zachycuje pouze malý segment toho, co budeme vlastně potřebovat pro plánování do budoucna. Možná to není moc dobré pro nás, kteří jsou zvyklí na to konvenční plánování, ale je to dobrá zpráva pro vás, která vám vlastně sděluje, že spousta věcí je potřeba udělat do budoucna. Takže plánování je vlastně dobrá oblast. Důležité je být interdisciplinární a mít přehled o spoustě různých témat a také mít kontakty s různými obory. Toto není můj slide, já jsem se jenom upravil. Je to od mého kolegy z univerzity v Groningenu a on mluví o tom, že budoucnost územního plánování je následující. Konvenční, obvyklé lineární územní plánování má nějakým způsobem předdefinované výsledky a využívá naprosto přímá opatření pro přímé výsledky. Řeknu si, potřebuji tady dálnici, tak ji naplánuji, postavím a ta tam prostě bude. Je to velmi lineární, velmi jasně z toho vyplývá, co je potřeba dělat, jaké je k tomu potřeba vybavení a tak dále. Další část, která vlastně vypadá jako ledovec pod povrchem, je odolné, adaptivní plánování, které je o dost flexibilnější, velmi otevřené a také částečně z velké části neformální, protože je schopné reagovat na nejistotu systémů, které v současné době máme. Díky široké paletě různých stakeholderů, spoustě různých opatření a transdisciplinárnímu přístupu a procesu.
As a physical system, we need to develop together the way how people live in the city and how they react to these changes. So we need everybody to take part in these planning processes. The planning process is much more important than the infrastructures, but it doesn't mean that the linear planning is disappearing. No, we still need it. We still need drinkable water. We still need engineering. We still need our sewage and our massive and functioning cities. The message is, this is not enough. So what is in between? We need to generate an adaptive capacity by 3 measures. We need to be ready for change, respond to the change, and allow for the change. And both together, this is what I understand under integrative planning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan. We plan the day that there will be a debate after the 2 keynotes, so there will be space for raising questions, but just for opening the discussion, maybe having 1 or 2 questions is a good time to do. So if any of you feel like raising a question now to Jan, can be a technical question regarding what has been said, or you can keep it for the further panel. Yes, Ute?
I would have one because, let's say, that's pretty. Thanks a lot for the presentation. And also, let's say, for me, the biggest question is kind of what the allowance for change would mean for planning regulations. Because I think there we are super, super slow.
Yeah. Yes, that's a very good question. I have started with these 3 points that planning is too slow and so on. Just go there. And I actually think that these critics are right. We are too slow, and we are not just enough, and we are very unflexible. So the important point, I think, which is for me in your question is, it is not only about adding something on the planning. We need to really change about how we are providing the planning. Yeah, I mean, the last group that we have, that we had in the morning, yeah, or even the group here, the questions always would be, how much time does it take? Yeah, this could also be the question. So when we are discussing about the development of a brownfield, do we need 20 or 25 years as we do in Prague or in Berlin at the moment? Do we have the time? That's actually the question. The problem that I try to address, to make it short, is that, in my opinion, the reaction cannot be then we abolish the planning. The answer have to be, or the question have to be, how can we provide the quality much faster? And I really think we have the discussion in Germany at least, and I feel there is a similar discussion in Czech Republic by remodeling the planning law for the 14th time in 20 years. It's actually, it documents the endeavor to change the planning system. You know, the German planning law is very old. It's actually from the 19th century. It has been codified for the modern times in the 60s, and from the 60s it had been changed once in the year 86. So we are still working with a law which is very, very old. It's developmental law, very linear. You do plan and then you wait, somebody will build. This is not how it works anymore. And the powers are very reluctant to change these things. And one of those who are very reluctant are the planners, us. They say, the system is so good in it. Yeah? This is like staying with the gas engine and not going to electrics. The system is so good. Yeah? And the basic problem is we don't know how to change it. And in my opinion, there are some radical moments that need to be tackled. And we even need to ask ourselves, do we really need the development plan, Bebauungsplan? Yeah? Do we really need this kind of, each of these levels that I have been tackled? So do we really need a land use plan which is rigid for 20 years? Do we really need rational orders? Can we scale up differently? Do we need expansive spatial pattern where we have no space and very big side effects of urbanization? And do we need this?
Thank you. We can leave it here because it's a lot of open questions, and we can thank you again and ask Ute. Wien, urbanist and designer. I will just. Is this one, yeah? Or PDF?
I know the PowerPoint. Super.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I would like to discuss further on that. We do that later. Thanks a lot. I'm also talking from a background as a planner, but on a completely different, out of a completely different perspective. Let's say always a question of challenging existing codes and transforming them from bottom up, so to say, or informal. But that may be later. What is the role of an architect planner yesterday, today, and tomorrow? And I think just a brief insight, who am I? I'm on one hand a partner of KCP of about 125 people from different kind of backgrounds, nations, cultural contexts, working on architecture, urbanism, and landscape. From within different kind of cities, depending on the projects we have. Let's say the key offices are in Rotterdam and Zurich. I'm based in Zurich, started to work in Rotterdam, and also pretty much informed by having worked in that country in several offices. I come to that later. What is also for us important to work through scales and also different disciplines. So it's always kind of touching urban designs, landscape, but also architecture. So that always looking into at least 3 scales. I'm asking also students to work on that, because we have in different scales different kind of questions, and also being capable to see different things. So we work on living environments, transformations of existing stock, culture and education, campus developments, innovation districts, transformation of brownfields like the Hafen City, but also work in innovation, even resilient landscape and infrastructure, so kind of protecting islands or peninsulas from water, and a lot in, let's say, connecting places stands for transformation of station precincts from all scales till airport cities. On the other hand, I'm teaching now next to practice, and that's pretty important for me to work within both kind of theory, academic kind of teaching, but also staying in practice at the TU in Vienna, kind of heading the chair of urbanism. We work very closely with an institute where urbanism, landscape, and development, let's say urban development, is integrated in one institute. So let's say the economic, the landscape, and the urban level. What was for me when I started in Vienna interesting, that everything was a bit within the academy. We tended with the first art diploma, we did also together with landscape kind of to really go into the city and also look beyond, let's say, our institute, kind of what is the impact we could have and should have within the city. I'm also working on, let's say, really relevant tasks within the city. This was one of the first summer schools we established together with other institutions, with the Academy of Fine Arts and with the Academy of Applied Arts, to work together, let's say, on a transformation area of an existing kind of university that has to be transformed, maybe demolished to be again a university. Question mark today whether we should do that. When we were doing that, kind of, I was asked once, how did you manage kind of to collaborate with these 2 institutions? And I was a bit shocked, so yeah, I just asked. And they were open to do so. So I think it's a question of really trying to do and to develop. Types of urban regeneration, what I like to address here is kind of, we went also so different kind of times and scales, and it's constantly changing. So starting with brownfield rejuvenation of kind of inner city areas like industrial areas, harbor areas, was very often, like in a Hafen City, really building something new, trying to at least keep some things. Even this Kaispeicher A, which is now the Philharmonie, was kind of pretended to go. There was also once a headquarter, pretty ugly of glass headquarter of a huge enterprise. Luckily, we could keep that. That was at that time not really possible, because let's say the whole area is lifted kind of 150 meters below water level, kind of, otherwise it has a wet feed. The second generation was really trying to work with kind of industrial, with creative industries, keeping also aspects like you already addressed with one group on site, which is the NDSM terrain in Amsterdam. This is an image from 25 years ago. If you go in that kind of NDSM building, you will see the same picture. So it's still there, and it's really now part of the city's economy and even kind of tourism of the city. The next generation is then really kind of trying to transform and bringing, let's say, working and labor and productivity in urbanizing these areas, which has a certain kind of limit, and also looking really to adaptive reuse of existing stock and industrial areas, like you see at the very end. As architects and urban planners, we focus on the interplay between these 2 disciplines, and we are interested in how different elements interact across scales, from individual buildings to the city and its surrounding regions. And this was already addressed kind of also before, kind of, and also this morning. We always need to look beyond, let's say, the site, the city. We have to look into the region. And also the countryside, because each city is only existing with its region. They examine the relationship between built and space and society, how designed environments shape social interaction. And it is exactly this kind of aspect of multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary economy, social kind of encounter, relations between different cities, like you also addressed this morning. And we have to look into that metropolitan regions and systems as a holistic system. So this systematic approach and also working within this kind of volatilely and kind of constantly changing aspects is crucial. And maybe I'm pretty much influenced by that, having worked in the Netherlands for quite a while. And when several offices, kind of this country is completely engineered, completely man-made and completely transformed. And whole Europe is completely man-made. We are just not aware of it. And the whole planet we are kind of planning and somehow also destroying. But bringing me to this kind of map I really love, kind of, which we translated a little bit when we were working on the legacy of the London legacy framework, let's say the Olympics in London, starting from 2007, the Olympics they planned in 2005. In 2007, they already installed a kind of, and launched a tender to think about how to integrate all this kind of whole infrastructure planning that has to be done for 2 times 2 weeks in the kind of regeneration of the city. And you see on the right-hand side, this is a map from Sir Abercrombie about the social, let's say the boroughs and the social construction, social map of London. And on the right-hand side, you see, let's say, something we added at that time too. It's another centrality that was kind of planned already at the time, planning the Olympics and the integration of the Olympics, which is now East London, which was a completely deprived area within the city, completely contaminated ground, kind of vacant kind of industrial buildings and no connection. So this was kind of an example of how to, let's say, looking to the city as a system and an organism and how this will change over time, and it will change constantly depending on what we are doing, whether we bring a new university or new economics or something in it. Designing for openness and designing coexistence is also something that is a core of let's say, our office. And this was, let's say, the headline and the publication of the biennial in Rotterdam, kind of in 2009. How can we design large projects without necessarily imposing uniformity and rigidity where variety and adaptability over time are desirable? This is a quote from a urban designer and architect, John Habraken from the Netherlands, which is still informing, let's say, how we work and we should work. So how flexible kind of can we create, let's say, neighborhoods, even bigger structures and buildings, kind of that they can evolve over time and adapt to different situations. Who makes our cities and what part do everyday users have in the design of cities? This is kind of a quote from Fran Tonkis, kind of for sure you know her. She is a sociologist teaching at the LSE in London, and she shows, in my opinion, powerfully how city making is a social process, an economic and social process, and constantly kind of has to be close to relationships between the social and physical shapes and also economic and urban environments. Which also will be in that kind of new courses you establish, kind of an integrated part, kind of looking beyond our own discipline and integrating the ones that I found your quote, let's say your quote here, super important kind of to also rely on, where I now really will elaborate on certain kind of topics. Say what integrative spatial planning understands cities-led.
Takže integrativní plánování chápe
now involved some of them, and we always need to see which ones we need to add, because there is a question that applies a very specific kind of expert. But it's all about kind of integration, reflexivity, communication, sensitivity, and also being open to change and adapt, and also adapt rules or kind of question rules. But one thing is for myself pretty important also, kind of that as architects and planners, we are very often trained to build something new. We first have to understand where we are working. What do we find on place? Because generations before us have kind of informed these places. And then we can start to plan working with this kind of existing systems that are already there, because they're very often kind of functioning. So one thing I would like to address there is really embracing complexity. And please don't be afraid of complexity, because it's also kind of handleable. This is very often kind of I face this in discussions, yeah, but it's so complex, we better do nothing, kind of. We can and need to work in that, we can, it's not a problem. we were just also seeing kind of, let's say, and also for very good reason, what the Charter of Athens kind of transformed in kind of distinguishing kind of into monofunctional aspects for, at the time, really very serious reasons. But we are completely in a different time, and we really have to look into this kind of things. How do we transform the spaces? How do we reproduce them? How do we reactivate certain kind of aspects we have and we already established and not only built, but also natural and economical systems? And what is crucial are the top and the bottom line as well. So for monofunctional to mixed use and never produce a monofunctional kind of area or whatever, whether in agriculture, whether in let's say biological kind of questions, in a city monofunctionality is not the goal to go for, and monomodal is also not interesting and not really leading to urban kind of mobility structures, but we have to go to a multimodal kind of system, which also will reinterpret completely how we deal with streetscapes. These are just two graphs I show now also from, let's say, the very early plans, by the way, for the Transformational Legacy Master Plan framework. It was called a master plan, kind of we translated it into a framework, so it's adaptable over time, so it's not fixed. It's just a flexible network kind of and we were very clearly looking at that time kind of what are the already existing identities and neighborhoods and character.
Jaké jsou již stávající oblasti, které tady fungují, a měli jsme se snažit stavit na tom, nebo vystavět to z toho a nikoli ignorovat to, co tam již bylo. Takže velice
built with new kind of a big variety of people, a big variety of processes, but built upon the identities and the souls and the sense of the place. Another aspect that within integrated planning is really looking into multidisciplinary teams. We already discussed this this morning. It was addressed several times. And we really need to understand, let's say, and also see what do we really need, what is working and what experts do we need. We don't need always the same range of experts because a lot of things functioning as well. And I like to show this at some graphs. We were working also with a lot of different kind of experts, some names you probably know, on the transformation of a military barrack site outside of Heidelberg, where with several kind of experts over time was really thought about the knowledge development kind of with MBRDV. There was Karol Ratte involved, and you see also, for instance, on the right-hand side, a graph he was looking into. You see on top the graph of, let's say, the Charta from Athens. Then you see, let's say, Jane Jacobs, which was already, she was also already addressed, where she already said we had to really kind of look into clusters, overlaying of different kind of program. But we are now in a time of digitalization and proximity that is even more scattered and more overlaid and smaller structured. So we have everything kind of constantly kind of changing during the day, and we need to create these proximities. To show a little bit, let's say, these multidisciplinary approaches, they have to be structured, they have to be organized, they also change over time. That was, for instance, done in this dynamic master plan. Special groups, that was the second generation, where we were working with on the typologies, on the kind of program mix, on the productive landscape, urban landscape, multimodality, and the digital city, with several kind of experts that were involved in this process. And we were much more, like we saw this morning, let's say the director, let's say, or the choreographer of this big group of experts. And that is very often the job of a planner. And this also has to be organized in a collaborative manner, but always address also the politics, the politician parties, the administration parties, kind of the planning team, but also stakeholders, investors. And I strongly believe that we need to go to private-public partnerships. We have to integrate the private kind of sector, but we also have to have a certain strategic, system-relevant top-down planning, because otherwise we will end up like in the UK, and we are a bit on the way to go that direction. But looking also in communication, how do we really integrate the citizens and also other interested groups and initiatives. Here, one graph from a completely different project, but that also shows, let's say, how it should go from a much more multidisciplinary, multi-layered approach I'm also looking into repair by development, but carefully kind of looking into how do we regenerate damaged nature into a really recovered natural system using natural kind of nature-based solutions and not only trying to solve all these questions with technical kind of aspects, because only with technological kind of solutions, I think we will destroy our planet completely. I already addressed it once before. A multi-scalar approach is really strongly, let's say, influencing our work and also my teaching. I have to say, kind of, I really ask students also to work always constantly on 3 scales, depending on the task. So once in a while it's from architecture or urbanism to maybe look a bit beyond the perimeter. Once in a while, it's even bigger. I show them later an image. So it's on one hand the urban scale. For this project, for instance, then you have an area scale, kind of how does this kind of new development, let's say, integrate into its morphological, but also kind of mobility concept and also natural concept. Then what is it on an architectural level, and what does this mean then for the interior organization, which we also very often call interior urbanism. So attacking a kind of big building always with this kind of aspect of how do people move through a building and where do they come together and where can innovation really happen. So this kind of is a bit similar on all scales. This is a project, the Science Park in Amsterdam, where we were working kind of, still working on together with the landscape office, Carsten Brands from Hilversum, where you see also again these different scales. So the master plan of the campus development completely, then the mobility and walkability network, but then also going to the scale of really detail. What does this mean then kind of with flow lines, etc. on scale. And this is an example of a student project kind of in Vienna. You probably see a little bit the scale of the Vienna city where they really were looking into the energy systems of the, let's say, the city and how can they translate it also in the space. And they went on one hand really to look into where are certain energy sources kind of really applying on a European, on a metropolitan region, on a district and on a, let's say, neighborhood level, and also really translating this into sections and kind of designs on site. And then the aspect designing flexibility, which sounds maybe a bit contradictory, but this is on the heart of our let's say, methods. This is a station district precinct in Zurich, which was a railway yard kind of before, where you see all this kind of mixed use developments. What we did at the time was really kind of to look into what is really there around, because the area itself were kind of just metal sheds and tracks. And then looking how can you connect over that track of rivers, that river track, and we really also addressed it a bit like a river, because there's an open space that is a rail track kind of where trains go in and out, and how can we relate visually and also physically over this kind of barrier. And you see that, let's say, in this different kind of levels, kind of how can you really integrate it into the urban system, but also using that kind of track space as an urban space. Brings me to this kind of question of these were the development fields, and how can we design and plan in a way that it stays flexible. So these were the building fields, kind of with some numbers when they are available. Was completely different afterwards. It will always be like that. Don't take this whole for granted, but use these parcels because they are, innovation ownership is really relevant. Then we started really on top of that kind of how can you, let's say, build there on top. And you see now slowly starting, let's say, cutting off the existing kind of streetscapes around through the area, but also new lines that link to the existing station square, which you see kind of in front of the building. And then also chopping it off kind of to really relate to the existing neighborhood till we arrived at a theoretical 3D envelope wherein kind of due to regulations, I come to that now, kind of can be built. So this is not a buildable volume, this is just a playground, so to say, to building concerning different kind of rules. We only added additional rules. Each city has certain rules, so we added kind of rules that they need to have a block structure that is relating to the existing block. Then slenderness of towers and also other additional volumes. So within that framework, also with data-based and also simulative exercises kind of concerning 2-hour shadow you see here, which we even kind of developed together with the ETH and Kaiserswerth. How can this evolve over time? First come serve, so not predict where the tower will come first, but all within this 3D envelope. And you see, let's say, certain kind of, let's say, possibilities evolving. This is not possible. This 2-hour shadow can only overlap where no residential kind of will be built. So you see here the model, kind of the wireframe is, so to say, this 3D framework within kind of the city can develop over time. And a possible infill, which we kind of presented at the time. You see it here next to each other, empty, with an existing building here in front. That is the front building, a heritage building. The second one was not clear whether it will go. And then we did tests within the office, kind of give this envelope to 4 teams, and you see here 4 different kind of infills that are possible. Maybe a side note, and here, for instance, now the most attractive side in the north, kind of facing south, kind of how people use this public space directly adjacent to the river, to the track spaces. And when we were kind of discussing this at the time in 2004, 2004, everybody told us nobody will ever go there. They said it is a stupid idea to elongate the last and the first platform, kind of nobody will use this space. We didn't discuss it anymore, we just did it, and people using it now. So once in a while you also don't discuss it, kind of just continue, and it will maybe, we don't need to convince people always kind of with these kind of things 100%. Brings me to the last one, scenario planning, which was also addressed before, kind of working in different scenarios. And this scenario thinking was interesting enough. We found also not so long ago out kind of really also a Dutch invention by Pierre Wrack, working for the Royal Dutch Shell at the time. And KCP was involved in the 19th really to integrate this into urban planning. It is unfortunately not very well established in other countries. So this linear planning or fixed planning, which we also faced in Zurich, we proposed that flexible plan. The head of city planning department at the time was not able to cope with this flexibility. So this model I have shown you was kind of really hidden somewhere, and we had to kind of rework the plans in a different way. And because this is also kind of a question of convincing, let's say, politicians or kind of decision makers. But the good thing about the scenario planning is that we can, let's say, really test 7 kind of, let's say, possibilities, see the advantages and disadvantages, and can proactively kind of avoid failures kind of that have to be repaired later on, which we normally at the moment very often do within a linear planning process. But it's still not very common to work on that. One project where we have really elaborated on that was, it's an industrial area, an industrial part of the city, in the middle of the city, called Werkstatt Zurich for the SBB. It's a workshop where the Swiss rail company is repairing train wagons. They will reduce to 50% of the site. Still stays a workshop, and it will stay an industrial site. It's regulated in the planning law like an industrial area. So no residential, which is also good. But you can imagine that some investors question this very heavily kind of on such a central spot. What you see here again is also looking into, let's say, this is a left-hand side is the map of the city where the big green corridors go through. And this is directly linked then to, let's say, the pattern we found on site. All the existing buildings are monuments, so we have to keep them. And we also had a strong focus on what is the green and open space kind of we like to keep. This was then translated into several scenarios, because the tram line should go along. The tram line that crosses kind of goes along the train station kind of development I showed earlier is supposed to go along here, very long term. Then we had several kind of scenarios and variants you see on the left-hand side, and then different parameters and aspects, and they can all be combined, not all, but some combined to each other to create certain scenarios. So quite an open, flexible framework. And on top of that, and you see now left-hand side, again, several kind of infills within that kind of different scenarios, but also kind of how can new development be juxtaposed over existing heritage buildings. I had once a tour with 25 heritage experts. I was pretty much overwhelmed by this amount from the city, from the SBB, from the canton, and even I think on the country level. Everybody had a different interest in this kind of site, but it's also an advantage, to be honest, for that site, because otherwise development and investors would like to destroy this kind of buildings as well, and will, so to say, kill the sense and the soul of a place. Brings me to my last two slides and quotes. Cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because they are created by everybody. So we have to be aware of that everything we see, everything we touch as an architect or planner went through a lot of different hands, kind of people defined laws, building regulations, and so on before. So it's not that something is kind of given, you know, from certain top down only. We also have to question kind of things that maybe kind of not function today anymore, which were, like I told before, kind of the modernistic, kind of the distinction between residential and industries had a very, very serious purpose. And at the time it was, well, but we went too far, and we very often tend to do so. And this is a quote from someone that is not out of the field, an expert in system dynamics, Jay Forrester. People have always designed the systems within which they live and operate, and it's on us to design this system and link technology kind of developments, which are also super relevant with nature-based solutions, to a maximum so that the natural system can survive. Because we are part of a natural system, and if we don't take care of these natural systems, and this is not my quote, it is a quote from Sir David Attenborough, we will not survive. So we really have to look into the systems, and I think integrated urban planning and integrated urban studies is really, and integrated urban design is really key to do so, working with a lot of other disciplines because we need them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will move to another part. It will be panel discussion, but before we will start, so we'll have opportunity to discuss with Uta. You may stay and have a seat, because we are like smoothly going to move on to the other part. But maybe students, somebody would like to ask a question, like just to have image. So please take a seat. We are starting a first discussion panel. Why do we need integrative planning in time of change? And what are the new roles and integrative approaches? That's the title of the discussion. And I would like to welcome some of the guests you already know. So again, we have Miodrag Kucz, Ute Schneider, Mateusz Płaszczyk, Maciej Czunat, and Michał Żabiński. So welcome all. So this panel is intended to explore the relationship between integrated urban studies, that is one of the program, and integrative planning in the context of contemporary urban challenges that we discuss already in the morning and here with the two speeches that we already get of the keynotes. Integrative urban studies offer a multidisciplinary framework of understanding cities as a complex system shaped by spatial structures, social dynamics, and governance processes. So what I would like to do now, I'm going to ask each of our guests to explain how they are using the integrative approach in their everyday work. So tell us a little bit, what are your profession and how you see the profession in a 10 years time, maybe even a bit farther time perspective. So our future students could see actually studying this subject, what kind of jobs can they do in the future and how we see the development of the disciplines, because we have here few disciplines. So we will start with Miodrag. So please can we change the slides? Every guest had a homework of preparing 3 slides of up to 4 to tell a little bit about the challenge that he has in the everyday life. So starting with Miodrag, maybe some of the students could not hear your keynote speech in the beginning, so I will just remind that you are a transdisciplinary artist, urban terrorist. Yeah, you are as well theorist. Well, yeah, we will go into it. I would say you're an activist from time to time. So, so you're working with complex situations, what you called ephemeral structures, and you're as well dealing with urban politics. So, I will give the floor to you. If you can explain probably one more time what are you doing and where you see the challenge.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm also sometimes not sure what I'm doing, but I'm trying. Actually, what I pick up here also I briefly go to 3 different scale. One like a building and people, then public space and people, and then ephemeral structure and the people. As you see, I work really in a part of the planning that consider direct relation with what we call nowadays actors, and a bit forgotten part of the planning, the people that are inhabiting spaces. We're always talking about in real estate about clients, in the participatory budget about citizens, and in the housing about vulnerable groups, but we really know less about who are those people. And we have less formats to encounter what their real problematic is. We do the questionnaires, we do demographic studies, we receive the data sets. But I think once you are with them in the, let's say, concert on the rooftop, you get much more interesting insights into their understanding of space than putting them in a, let's say, conference or in a participatory format of World Cafe. So that's I notice from really beginning of my professional work, and then I start actually creating this situation where people, or let's say staging the situation when people get a bit more relaxed and kind of express their spatial thoughts and political, basically, relevance of what they are interested in. And yes, I also think that it's, we mentioned in some coffee talks here that it's very important to invest into political education of people being invited to co-design or plan with us planners, because I think it's very often that people just participate by expressing some wish list and without really knowing how planning works. So comparing to some other disciplines, you know, nowadays everybody knows how to treat itself as a small house doctor, but nobody knows how planning works. You know, majority, I would say 95% of the people, common people, even educated, they don't understand how planning works, you know, and I think that's our role of also, we took it as a cultural and urbanist institute to basically to work with this gap that is there, you know, obviously. And I think more we invest in empowering this community to be part of a planning process, the better spaces we are receiving at the end. It's not really design. And coming back to your crucial question of what is the role of integrated urban studies in this, we cannot change the planning if we don't change education about planning. I think we have to build a new generation, and I hope some of people sitting here are this generation, new generation of planners, you know. So that maybe some of them are also here among us. So sooner you start to participate in a spatial interventions, in a one-to-one scale of understanding how planning is working actually, this can be building a temporary festival as a student, or it can be a summer school you are participating, better planner you exist. I think my claim is that you cannot become a planner if you just go in planning school. You have to have some other, let's say, education on top. And yeah, I just choose like a very different, you know, people in spaces doing something, and I think it matters in which form and frame you invite people to participate. And I think if you invite them to the festival or invite them to not to speak and observe or invite them to perform is very different. You know, you get a different outcome. So basically, what art is doing is basically producing endless amount of encounters and images how spaces could look like. And then planners can learn from this and then implement this in planning. So that's my kind of role. There is no school for that. I just learned it by doing it.
Well, I'm just about to ask you about your methodology, or if you have some. Let's say you are arriving in a space, so new space, you are asked to animate it, to transform it. What are the steps are you taking, and how you're taking decision, okay, this will be the best action for the place?
Yeah, me personally, I always look what is there. You know, if there is a wasteland in which people are with dogs, I talk first to them and say, why you are here with a dog, what you are doing, what is your daily practice, how often you are coming with a dog here, which kind of dog is there, do you have a dog friends, you know, like doing kind of deep, let's say, forensic research of existing, you know, like more anthropological observation. Then I will check who is the mayor of the city, is there possible to access, who is the maybe some kind of powerful stakeholder. It can be also a tycoon, you know, like that somebody has a telephone number of this guy, you know, so basically understanding who is in the game around one abandoned brewery, that we just see as a ruin, you know. And then slowly trying to find a way how to get not all of them in a panel, maybe, but, you know, to meet them in some more relaxed form, you know. And then basically writing the brief for a transformation. You know, I think the brief, what we call in planning and architecture, is the crucial document. So this brief also needs to be understood as a changing kind of instrument. You know. And then design, we have enough knowledge, I think, of design, of technical, of planning. Things are there in place. Just this before planning is kind of very weak point.
I ask you to prepare 3 slides, and I will ask for...
They're here.
You are,
1, 2, 3.
So you already have all of them. So maybe because we don't have a lot of time, we will move to next guest.
Thanks.
And we will have a discussion after. You know already Ute Schneider, trained carpenter, architect, urban planner, a partner at KCAP with more than 25 years of international experience, as well as a professor at the Technical University of Vienna. What is her... Yeah, we ask Ute as well to say what is her strong expertise. But I think you explained it during the lecture already.
Yes, I think so. I think I explained a lot already. That's the reason why I put just a compilation of, let's say, different projects together, even my thesis project, interior projects, kind of where I was running through. And I think this is, let's say, also what shaped me. You know, coming from when I kind of told in Vienna kind of that I'm trained as a carpenter. And first of all, I got a reaction, you have a very illustrious kind of CV. And I said, but what shall I do now with this kind of? I found it first a bit irritating, and then I understood it's not a linear path, but yeah, it's fine, you know. And when I was doing this carpentry education, I thought this was kind of due to a specific school. I wanted to study interior architecture, which I luckily didn't do. And afterwards, I thought I have lost 3 years. And then years later, I realized, no, I didn't lose 3 years. I learned a lot. But in that time, kind of, I was really thinking, hey, this was just a waste of time. And then later, kind of, as an intern in an office in the Netherlands, Neutlings Riedijk, I was as an intern, they asked me to design, to draw the principal designs of a fire brigade, and I was completely embarrassed. I said, so, oh my God, why I'm not even finished, I have no clue. What do you dare to ask me? You're the only one that can do that. Okay. So, and I learned a lot by that as well, but I also learned a lot in the Netherlands, and I think you probably similar. There is an enormous openness of, let's say, towards experiment, and everything is in a constant flow and also in a change, but there's an enormous openness of trying to, let's say, establish new things, but you have to prove them as well. So the time for planning is nearly a bit the same, it's just a different kind of way of approaching it, but this learned me a lot to look to things differently, and I also studied at several universities, which also learned me that an architecture and urban designer education is so different from school to school. And I only, let's say, that I like about this also urban studies, kind of that you will change even from several kind of perspectives of disciplines, because we have to understand a little bit, let's say, all the different disciplines, aspects, fields of work we can work as an architect and urban planner. And this is a huge variety of skills. We are not an expert in nothing, but we are an integrator kind of in a lot of different things. We have to understand what we know and what we don't know, and then asking other experts kind of to collaborate with that. And I think this is a bit about our profession. And staying curious and also open. And yeah, what I heard from, or let's say even in my, I didn't send you that CV, kind of, let's say people in our office now, that I have a humanistic approach to things. Yes, I have. But also to the space, let's say, to the places, kind of that there is a respect in where we work and with whom we work and for whom we work. And this should be always for a better goal. That's a bit, and I just put two other kind of reference. Let's say a big scale, one project kind of we are working at the moment on is the transformation of a former military airport into an innovation district. And everybody is kind of digging on the, let's say, the details and the problems. And we also kind of work on the transformation of one of these interiors. I just chose another. And at a certain point, we said, hey, wait a second. There is also a really opportunity with this whole transformation for the bigger region. And starting to do these graphics, kind of what does it mean for the region and the metropolitan area of Zurich, and not only, let's say, for the site. This is the site kind of which is now, let's say, still in transformation with a lot of problems and a lot of exercises. And this is another kind of project where we also work at the moment on, and we need a long breath of an urban, it's an urban nearly architecture competition we won 3 years ago. And now it might slowly start because the municipality and in a direct democracy, kind of the municipality, the citizens kind of decide whether they go for a project or not. And they luckily did, so we hope we will continue. But you need a long breath kind of in that kind of, and still keeping on going, which I think I like to motivate people to do so.
Well, I have a question connected to this, you know, projects are going on or not. But you said something today that what you're doing, you are challenging the system. So even to introduce certain approach to planning, you have to convince, I don't know, decision makers, maybe the other planners. You know,
Yes.
how are you approaching it? How are you managing?
Once in a while we manage, I manage, once in a while not. So I also said to you kind of that, for instance, in that transformation of the station, this precinct in Zurich, we were not capable to convince the city planner kind of to use this flexible kind of framework. We really had to redesign it. We had to be constantly on top of that. It's kind of going in a direction it can go. We also could not convince, let's say, that this kind of, let's say, pavements kind of will be added value to the city. And there are also side roads, or let's say the crossing roads, I have to admit, they are not like we wanted to have them. So we have also to be open to failure, to things that are not going in the direction we want to have, and acknowledge that, but still trying to convince as much as possible the different kind of players, stakeholders, politicians, let's say political decision makers, kind of to go in the right direction for everybody. And this is, let's say, the constant kind of driving fear of working in that discipline. And a lot of things we produce kind of will also land maybe in, I learned from one of my former, let's say, also bosses and a good friend of mine, Wilma Neutlings in the Netherlands, where I used to work on this kind of fire brigade, for instance. You have to be aware that 80% of what you design will land in a paper bin. But constantly staying kind of within that kind of motto of still trying to convince, let's say, administration, politicians, and also kind of investors to go to the right direction. And interesting enough, if we explain it properly, we can move a lot.
Yes, thank you very much. Let's continue with the introduction. On my left is Mateusz Błaszczyk. He is a head of Department of Urban and Rural Sociology and chair of Scientific Discipline Board of the Sociological Science at the University of Wrocław. I think we have to move on. Can we ask you for help? Yeah. Yes, that's you, Mateusz. So we have a sociologist with us today, so talking about interdisciplinarity. Mateusz, could you...
Okay, so I would like to present you my view on integrative urban planning that comes from my research and experience on digital life, digital cities, digitalization in the city. Okay, I would argue that the integrative urban planning, Okay, let's start with this, that in conventional urban planning, we are focusing on physical space, physicality of space. Okay, but in nowadays, this definition is incomplete. Okay, we live in something like hybrid turn, in which the digital layer of space is integrated into the space itself, okay, the material space. So it means that urbanity, that space actually cannot or won't be able to function without this digital aspects. Okay, and this digital dimension is actually real. It has the physical agency on our life, on our urban behavior. Okay, this things like code, data, interface, they do the real work. They manage the traffic. They select people. They decide about the access to some things. Actually, the algorithms that are behind of these digital dimensions just work as a wall. Okay, we don't see it, but it regulates our access and mobility as good as the physical wall built from bricks. Okay, so it means actually that if the space is produced nowadays on the interaction of physical and digital dimensions, the focusing only on the physical side is just, well, cognitive, but also strategical error or failure. Okay, so it builds a new challenge for urban planning. Okay, why it's so? We are talking about some digital rift, but this digital rift means that we work, communicate, that we just make entertain or do actually a lot of things we're doing in everyday life through the digital objects, like remote working, like participating in some events on the remote way, like, well, experiencing anything just through digital interfaces, not physically. Okay, this just digital dimensions navigate our work, our trade, our social relations. So it means that the traditional master plan or urban plan is only like the decoration. Okay, so it means that municipality or urban planners may just create some vision of buildings or a street. Municipality may build it, but if it will be alive or not is decided by algorithms that show us in the digital space and allow us to get there. Okay, even nowadays, looking for, I don't know, place to eat. We just take in the Google Maps and say, find me a place for a dinner. Find me a place for a coffee. Tell me what interesting I may do. Tell me how may I get somewhere. Okay, and it means that the algorithm decide how we will navigate and behave in the space. Okay, so it means that actually the algorithm of navigation takes control on our real material behavior. And it means also that we gave the power, the control over the space to the owners of this algorithms. Okay, so we have some gatekeeping, new gatekeepers, like Meta, like Google, and they just regulate the rules of access to the space. And it's not because they are better, more effective, but it's because the municipality did not take the control over this hybrid space. Okay, there was left empty, so the algorithm, these companies just took control over it, and it means also they took control over the city. So the way of urban planning that is focusing only on the physical side, this physical aspect, is a form of abdication from the control over the city. Right? So it means that it leaves the inhabitant, the citizen, alone against the algorithm over which no one has democratic control. Yeah, okay. Okay, so it means that the integrative urban planning is not better software. It's not the better designing, but it's, in my opinion, the fundamental restructurization of urban power. Okay, that has the aim to pass the power over the city from the digital monopoles towards the inhabitants, towards the urban dwellers. It means that we should project or design the space not as empty places, but as environments in which the data infrastructures and algorithm transparency is as important as physical planning. Okay? So it means more or less that, that algorithms and data should be integrative part of spatial plans. So that's the way in which we should just find or try to take the power back to citizens and keep the control over the city by the governments, local governments, by people not allowed to decide what is going on in our cities, by the company located somewhere in California. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mateusz. I think you touch very important topic, actually, who should own the data. Because we do collect a lot of data, and from my own experience working on the Strategic Master Plan of Warsaw, when I started the process, I did not have the data. I did not have enough of it. So I have to start actually the whole process of collecting data. And it was quite expensive because we have to buy it from the companies. And then wherever we are collecting the data as municipality is then free for everyone. But vice versa is never happening. So I think it's a very important question. It's one of the layer. But from the sociologist's perspective, what do you think we should do? We should investigate the problem, how we can face it?
Well, the first problem is we have to understand what actually is going on, okay? Because nowadays we are thinking about that so-called smart city, which are completely digitalized, okay? But there is a problem, who takes power, who takes control over the city, and it means that we need to have the control over the data, okay? Because, as you said, nowadays the city, we all, governments, and produce a lot of data, but to use this data we have to pay for them, for the companies, they've just taken this data from us. Right? That's the problem. And it means that we need to fight for something I would like, well, there's the problem of the right to the city, the conventional problem in urban life, that citizens have to keep the control over the city, have the right to their city. Okay? Now this right to the city changed into the right to the data. We need to keep the control and we need to keep the right to the data that organize our everyday life, also the urban life.
I think we will come back to this discussion. It's important layer of everything, but we will move to Michał Żabiński. He is an assistant professor at the Krakow University of Economics, Department of Public Management. Could you tell a little bit more about your work? You are the only economist here. But the economy is very important, as we learned today during the workshop.
Okay, so I'm an economist, but my field of economy is institutional economy mainly, and a little bit of behavioral economy. What I am, I'm a storyteller, and I believe we are all storytellers. And if you want be urban planners, if we want to create spatial plans, you need to be powerful storytellers, because we, our people, are homo narrativus. We understand the world by the stories we tell ourselves about how work is ticking. So the powerful story is the story that sink in other people and let them better understand the world. And I was wondering, when I was asked to be participant of this panel, what to tell you to intrigue you into studying urban studies or spatial planning. And my idea comes from two sources. One of them is behavioral economics, and I will explain in a moment. And the second one was a project I'm still involved in, which is modernization of spatial planning in Poland, which is happening nowadays. So let me start with a very short and brief story. There is this concept of survivor bias. It's one of the many biases we have embedded in ourselves. And survivor bias is a very powerful story. Usually the illustration, the way to understand this bias is that during the Second World War, people start to investigate how to increase survivability of airplanes during the war. So they start to map bullet holes in airplanes, and the idea was very simple. The places where the holes are the places we need to force up, beef them up to make those planes harder to be destructed. But there was one Hungarian mathematician who said, no, don't do that. Look for the places that there are no holes, because those are the places that plane hit it there, do not come back. That's why we don't see those photos. So it is very important to see and realize those things usually we missed. And it's very important, because when you are hearing those stories about success, about Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Bilbao project, you're seeing only those successful stories, but you are blind to all of those failure stories. And we gain from failure. We learn much more from this failure than we learn from single success. And this leads me to the second point. What sticks me in science? I love disasters. What I'm interested in is a failure. It's something is working according to the theory, and it's going smoothly, it's boring. I'm not disinterested in. And spatial planning, because of that, is very interesting, because it usually doesn't go according to the plan, because there is the problem with different narratives, the different stories we tell ourselves about the world. And one single thing, because it struck me very, very hardly, what you have said about your bio, that for a long time you think that your background in carpentry was not important one. And this is a very important lesson for you. Do not dismiss any knowledge and experience you get during your life, because you will find a way to use this tool. You may not be able in this particular moment to understand how to use this tool, but during your life, through your experience, through your work, you will find a way to implement that knowledge. So, about spatial planning. This is what's happening with Poland. We are creating a new spatial planning plan. It is a very awkward process, because what we have realized that people who are responsible for spatial planning have a very negative opinions about the practice of spatial planning in Poland. So we try to dig up where is the problem. Why spatial planning in a theory is something different than spatial planning is in practice in Poland. So what we've done, among other things, was the problem of sub-regional planning. And we took Tarnów and municipalities around it to find some reasons. And as you can see, I put there some of those most important fragmentation. So each municipality is independent. So usually there's this problem of lack of the coordination of plan between municipalities, and there is a lot of, for example, infrastructures that goes beyond the municipalities' borders. Environmental risk, but of course, dependency on car and suburbanization. You all know these terms. Probably you, during your education or just by living, you have faced some of them. But those problems could be combined as a major ideas, and this is this idea. What do we have? What's the problem with the plan? Are we determining what we already have, or are we planning for what we want to have? And the problem is with what we want to have is who is we? Because within the municipality, within the region, we have different actors, different groups with different ideas, with different needs. And this is where the specialists, the urban planners, the spatial planners are important, because these are the people with knowledge to understand those different needs, and they are capable of proposing solutions that address different problems of different groups. But the problem lies in the fact that they can prepare a plan, but there are political actors who are implementing the plan. And usually they need to add something, take something away, which create different problems that need to be addressed. And the other part of the problem is that we are not preparing something once and for all. Because in the future, there will be new problems, new challenges, so we need to update the plan. But there are some things that are very universal and will always happen, which is the critical issues. It is I versus us, my needs, my resources, my land, my property, my right to gain some economical profits from what's mine. But there is us. There are some costs that society will have to endure if I succeed with my plan. So how to find this common ground between individual goals, for example, investors, and goals of the community as a whole, now versus future. We as people are present-oriented. It's very difficult for us to think about what will be happening when we'll be older. Yeah, so this is this is example we have in our discussion during the panel session, the workshop session. The needs of the older generation versus needs of the newcomers, young families with kids. Different groups, we need to manage to find a solution satisfying for all of those groups. We have private versus public. This is very problematic because usually private investors are those who have the power to control the agenda or to influence the agenda because they have these incentives that helps them to invest in the process. So there is this problem that different actors have different incentives to interfere with the process of spatial planning and influence the results, biasing them towards their gain. And there is this problem, our country versus other countries. And this is a huge problem which is very prominent in public policies. There is this idea that we can learn from others, beautiful theory. But there is a problem that we very often see in practice. So if we have this solution which works brilliantly in the Netherlands, let's just copy it. And in public policy, copy-paste do not work because we have different culture, different institutions, different laws. So this is very difficult to understand that we can take the idea, but we need to reconsider how this idea should work in our countries. So comparing between countries, and this is why this program is so interesting, because if you had comparison between 3 different countries, you can observe and learn how in different realities, different solutions work. Thank you very much. It was too long.
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry.
You are really the storyteller, so we see this. Matti, you are an architect, urban planner, and you studied here in Czech Republic and abroad in Belgium. And you co-founded the Tactiku Studio. So can you tell us more about your practice? You are young professionals, and you decided to do this step to run your own company, and here in Czech Republic.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was maybe something what you spoke about before, that maybe we also partly took some inspiration from Netherlands, because this idea of urban planning and have a practice which focuses on urban planning was really new in Czech Republic, because in the past architects somehow did all the scales from interior towards the city planning and so on. But we really believe that we should focus more on the bigger scale of urban planning because it's more and more complex. And I will just show you, I called it scales of impact, and I will really briefly show you 3 scales of projects we do in our office, Tactiky. This is the smallest one. It's probably 30 meters long, and it's somehow a community project we did in Stříbro, which is in Western Bohemia, and we were asked by the mayor to make an urban study for the center of the village, and we made pretty complex study about the traffic and change of the road and improvements of a pond, etc. And eventually they said, yeah, that's really good to have a vision, but we need to have something small we can start with, maybe with low budget, and really make some impact. And we discussed it with the community. There are maybe 100,000 inhabitants, which have really strong connection, and they said we really need to have a playground for the kids and some place we can come together and have a celebration. So we designed a playground and also this community space, which is just simple table, benches, and fireplace. And we designed it in really super simple way, so it can be really easily made and also maintained in the future, because it's really super simple wooden structures which they can repair by themselves, the community themselves. And when it was finished and we wanted to see the result, and we also took a photographer to make some pictures, we just told them that we will arrive, and maybe if somebody wants to come, they can be on the pictures. And what they did was they made a big celebration as a thanks for the project. So it was really nice, and they really took it as their own. So this is the smallest one. This is somehow middle scale for us. This is a new neighborhood for Slaný, which is close to Prague, and we made this proposal for international competition together with Studio Bauchplan from Vienna. And the main idea was that this part of the town doesn't really have a center. So we wanted to make urban structure not just a living, but also something with character, what can create a new center for the town. And also the main idea was to make a blue-green corridor which somehow reacts to climate change and can cool down the district. And last scale, we cannot see really clearly, but I will describe it as it, or if Jan can fix it maybe, yeah. Yeah, the last one is about the high-speed rail, and it's something like maybe 18 kilometers long area we studied, and we did it because there is a big project of high-speed rail for Czech Republic, and this part is between Prague and Berlin, and community of villages and municipalities were somehow afraid of the impact of the construction, also because this part of Czech Republic is very vulnerable because of the ecological impact, traffic, and so on. So we made a big analysis of the area and prepared a document which somehow is trying to find some possible strengths and is trying to see this high-speed rail as more like a potential, which can be like a backbone for the new, let's say, like sustainable layer of the countryside. So this is the largest scale we did so far as urban planners.
So you are really working between the scales, like Ute as well. I have a question to you, but actually to everyone that we could actually think about it. How do you think that the profession will evolve in the future? So how do you think we should change it at the moment to be still be able to act in 10, 20 years? Because we have to start to act now. How you all see the next steps? You start, Maciej.
Should I start? As I see it from our perspective, I think I really see that we have to make bigger and bigger teams of different professionals because our work is more and more complex. So I think it's definitely this, bring more professions to the process, but also for us it's also somehow learning by doing, that we are somehow trying to gain more and more informations and the skills from different professions, so we really can organize the process better and to understand more these different points of view.
Well, who would like to start with?
I think it's a huge question, but I think the question, on one hand, what you said, I think is right. Kind of, we need to look to what kind of teams do we need to compile for a task, but we also really need to be, let's say, first analyze kind of what's the question, and because there's very often also a task for pulling up a very big team, and you'd maybe not need all the disciplines. So I think we have to look in both directions and really always look into the tasks. What I face in a way and what we try to do, but it's very, very hard to do very often. Kind of, if you look, we had a discussion in the office not so long ago that our people said, yeah, what we are doing, that's common sense, everybody knows. It's not like that. The problem is really looking into where can we have the biggest impact. And I think what's lacking at the moment, and it's nearly, let's say, I would say in the Netherlands, in Belgium, it's very clear that also system-relevant infrastructure needs to be integrated and planned by several different disciplines. In other countries, also in Austria, but also in Eastern Europe, it's not the case at all. So we have just engineers, they look into a kind of a very specific question because it's their job. And they cannot look beyond because they are not trained like that. So where do we need to look into what kind of, and I think especially infrastructure has an enormous spatial impact. We need to look on as planners and using that and trying to convince politicians kind of that this added value of thinking a little beyond the engineering needs, kind of how do we integrate it? We had a very good question this morning. How does this train line kind of will be integrated into the landscape? Very often completely neglected. I think there we need to really inform, let's say, politicians also looking into all the digitalization layers. But I think, and this kind of virtual aspects and digital database aspects, but there's always the link. We are physical, social creations and part of natural systems, and we're living in that space. So we need to bring these two elements kind of and two demands kind of into, need to integrate it. It's all about integration.
If I can, dream a bit, also I'll go even more radical and say maybe in the future the profession won't exist. This will be replaced by the specific teams formed for specific task. It won't be some kind of, I'm planner and then I make a team, but maybe brief will say, okay, you need a coding guy instead of landscape architect in your team, So I think, or you need a water specialist, which is not a planner mindset, but maybe it's a crucial for anti-flooding policy of one region. So I think that's kind of, idea of making professions also has already started to have or dismantling this, they already start in some, let's say, advanced schools. So kids now, they have this kind of, in some school, experiments of flip learning. So you don't have subjects anymore. You just go to school, and on the specific play through the sport, you do mathematics, English, and spatial planning. You basically learn how to critically think. And the rest is, design tools, machines, AI. This will all be your kind of toolbox to deal with. And your profession will be basically how to critically observe the situation and make an analysis. That's not going to happen because we have also, bad guys around, greedy investor, data centers, capitalist system, But, if we can dream a bit on the panel, why not to imagine this world?
What kind of skills we will have to have in the future? So what shall we train actually future generations in?
I think train to a bit elasticity of thinking. Not only this kind of problem plan project outcome. I think we are very technocratic currently and still using less of our like a humanistic approach. And one big part of our cognitive potential, I think it's not present in the rationality of space. I think we need a magic utopias, unexpected to happen. I think we went too much into this competition with the algorithm mechanical system. We just have to come back a bit more into dreaming to have a better. That's why old cities look the same, So there is no now city where I can go and say, wow, this is something. Usually I will see the historical city looks for me much more interesting now than the contemporary one. So yeah, that's my personal view on it. But Ute for sure has something.
Thank you.
But I think I agree, and we also saw, let's say, presentations of Rem Koolhaas kind of when he was really looking into this, corporate city centers kind of all over the globe. But that is exactly what I mean, kind of trying to understand kind of first, let's say, the sense and the soul of a place and the origin that it has grown in, because centuries before kind of also our predecessors knew kind of how to deal with that specific plot in that climate, in that topographical area, or in this economic system. But this is changing, so we have to adapt to that as well. And I really strongly believe in that kind of to teach and also to stay aware of, let's say, what is needed, not only in this anthropocenic kind of approach, but kind of what is really needed, kind of that we can create livable areas with kind of, let's say, densification within kind of city systems, but we also need to be aware of the region kind of that needs to feed this kind of system. And how do we do this in a way in coexistence with different cultures, with different kind of needs, with different generations, but also with different species, being part of these natural systems. And I think we faced this in the pandemic. I was living in a country kind of where I was very, very free. I cycled each day to the office. I had so many, let's say, video calls, whatever, with other people in the world. And the most impressive was once kind of an architect from Cyprus when we had an overall critic at the AA in London. I fucking hell want to see a stranger. So yes. We need this social interaction. Even if we have a lot of digital, I completely agree, it helps a lot. But we need these social interactions because we're social beings. And I think this will stay. We face a lot of problems in the youth kind of that were not, that had, they lost 2 years in that sense of creating social kind of.
Thank you. Yeah, I would still like to ask a question to you, Mateusz. You are a sociologist, so just very fortunately, about public participation, because we touch now this, how this discipline should evolve. What kind of skills we will have to have in the future to manage the processes?
Well, okay. The public participation is actually some, I would say, well, it's a problem itself with the public participation. It's something like this. Okay, we should to understand that that public participation is nothing given, but is produced by society. Okay, that's some skills or some resources that some people have and some other do not have. Okay, and it is not like something neutral, but it's also. It's just a matter of some resource that is used in social life, okay? In social, well, just giving the example, okay? We have something like participation budgets. You know what this is. This is that there is some fund and people have to decide what they want to spend this money for. Okay, and they can build some projects. And the problem is that it is biased because in such an action participate only people with some level of social capital. Those who understand what is about, what is for, how they may use it. And the second problem is that most commonly the projects that won are completely unnecessary for the local community because they choose from some ready solutions. Let's build the playground. Let's build the, I don't know, a public game, open game. Or let's build a bike road. Okay, because there are ready solutions, easy to understand, and this is like competition. Okay, it's better to have it in our place than in other place. So let's mobilize for building something like public game, and we won, there is a better place. But nobody is using this game.
So yeah, that's one aspect of this.
It means that this is much bigger, deeper problem to solve, okay? And we may try to approach it, yeah. You know, the common solution is, let's ask people. And people simply say, we need more parking places. That's the first problem. In Polish city, there is the first problem is the parking places, the second problem are parking places, the third problem are parking places. And then we may talk about something different. Okay? But if we ask people what they actually want to do in the simply way, they will just say that we want to be healthier, happier, younger, and richer. Okay?
Well, so do we have to actually reinvent the way how
we need to
are
use more
making a dialogue?
specified, more advanced tools for understanding the people's choices, okay? And there are such methods. There's some statistical methods, some problems that, I don't know, they are not used commonly, okay? But we may precisely check what are the transfers between some choices. Asking not only what you want, but what is the cost you would like to pay for it. Not money cost, but resign from something else, okay? We will have this public game, open game, but it means that we won't have something different, okay? And just let's try to decide, but it means that we should develop the better tools for investigation, for also sociological investigation, which exist, but, well, are not used commonly.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I would still like to use like 3 minutes. If there are questions from the public, then please, that's the time. And we will... No questions yet.
Has a question.
I think we will sum up and we are going to continue the discussion. Oh, there is a question.
Yeah, actually, I was kind of interested. Thank you. Actually, I was kind of interested to hear what other alternative tools to investigate. What do people need? You can say you said that this tool we have now are not very effective. So if you can continue on this, it would be very nice.
Well, okay. Actually, I'm just working on the data that were gathered in some small town by Wrocław. Okay, there's a town of Siechnice that is a very small town, and we were asking about people's reference, what they would really want in, using so-called CBC approach. There is a conjoint analysis. In technical form, is a conjoint approach that is I don't remember what does it mean exactly, the CBC, okay? But it's, in general, there's a conjoint technique that measures that we face. Would you like A option or B option? And we just make some number of iterations like this, and it helps us precisely, very precisely, compute what are the preferences, which is over which, okay? And we, for them, subsequently find that people from such a city don't want anymore to invest in the better connection with Wrocław. There's not so important issue, yeah, but the city want to do it, okay? And actually we find something like interesting problem with, let's say, migration gap. There's a satellite city that developed because of industry. That industry built the possibilities to make some amenities in the city. Yeah, also the flats or housings that magnet young families from Wrocław. Okay, and now this young family says we don't want industry anymore in our city. So something what was the source of the economic success is not accepted by current inhabitants. Okay, and it looks also something interesting things that we find that these people, young people with young families, let's say in general, young families that come to the city, and nowadays there are majority in the city, so the demographic structure is completely destroyed, wants just amenities for young families. but they don't think what will be in the 20 years. Okay? And such a research also cannot identify what want the people who are older, because there are no such people now in the city, in the town, investigate. Yeah, but basically there is this approach is called conjoint analysis. They are somehow popular in marketing, okay, not in urban studies.
Okay, so it's actually, yeah, we have to know all the available tools. That's why we would like everyone to join us with the studies. Mateusz is one of the teachers. Michał, if you could.
I would like to add two things. Harari once said that humans are those incredible animals, and one thing that makes us different from other animals is that we are able and capable of knowing something and don't knowing it in the same time. So, and there is a very important key. You need to ask the right questions to get the answer. If you ask people, what do you want? They will tell you car prices. Yeah, wrong question. Wrong question. No, we did, during this project, we asked officials from the municipalities what they want, and we received the wrong questions. Then we created a drawing, a map of current situation, and we gave them the map and asked them, okay, write down, do the drawing, show us where the problems are, and then they start to thinking, this is the way usually people goes to work, so we need to have a public transportation which is absent. They knew it, they knew the solution, they knew the problem, but we asked the right question, show us what needs to be done from your experience. So there is this need of having, it's not a cost efficiency method, but it is the right method, I believe. We need to start working with people to help us find the solutions. And I will give one more example. There is always this problem about flood areas. Which are excluded from development. You cannot build a house or create something because this is a flood area. And usually with the public administration is marking on a map which those areas are excluded, it creates a lot of tension. The government is taking something from me. I cannot build on my land because they declare this is a flood area. So I found an example during this research when experts do this reverse psychology. They gathered people from the area, they show them the map and tell them this one simple thing. We do not know where the flood may go. Do you remember your parents told you do not build here, or you remember from your childhood where the water was, and help us create the specific area that should not be allowed to build? And those people agreed and create much bigger excluded area, and there was no fight about this because they understood why this area needs to be excluded, because it was built on their experience. So asking the right questions help us to create right solutions, help to understand what people really need.
That's, yeah, I have to, Abab, we have to finish. We are 5 minutes over the time, and there's still one more very exciting panel to follow. Thank you, everyone, very much. Yeah, we understand that the profession has to be very broad. And the last example you said, we have to be as well psychologists somehow. So thank you very much.
Počkáme, až dostane mávnuto. Ano, skvěle. A máme tady prezentér, když tak.
So I'll begin. All right, I already introduced myself. I'd just like to add that beside working at the university, I've been also working in a design studio, and I brought 3 examples. And it's about different approaches. I have an orientation based on a quote by Sans Swanstrom, how to move around in spatial planning. He has 3 points that he relates to resilience, but I think spatial planning can be considered as well. You need to go beyond organizations, territories, and ideas, which means that spatial planning has to overcome the borders or transcend the borders of capability and responsibility. You have to collaborate across institutions and other stakeholders, meaning speaking with everyone, not just those who are given by law or directly affected. And thirdly, mobilize resources from external sources, because what we are doing actually is intervening into functioning systems that need to be redirected. And there is a source from the outside that is needed. It doesn't have to be financial, but also conceptual, perhaps.
For example, if we cooperate outside the frameworks that exist within those boundaries that I presented in my introduction, I selected an example which is agglomeration concept between Köln and Bonn. And what's interesting about it is that it stretches across 2 federal states and 5 administrative entities. And about 15 years ago, they were planning different, separately, even though there was this economic zone that overlapped. There is a river flowing through that region. You may still remember the last group that presented here. And as part of that, this caused problems with floods, and also problems concerning the use of various zones and transportation. And this had to be solved by communication of different mayors, and this was the beginning of what we have now. It's a parallel process. Aside from the spatial planning, they call it zoning management, and in the last 5 years, the point was how to use the outcomes from the zoning management, which is very unofficial, how to include it into this technocratic planning of the regions. And the crucial problem is that the legislation doesn't allow us to do this. And our task is not only to find a way through that, but also with the students and the graduates, how to change the rules for the spatial planning to be able to flexibly move according to the topics and not the administration boundaries. That was point 1. Now, this is a different scale. This is something that the group left of me solved. This is the city of Hürth, 35,000 inhabitants next to Hausen, 10 minutes by bus, 100,000 inhabitants, and they built a shopping center, and the center of this town of 35,000 people died out within 3 to 5 years. And now our task was to create a new concept of the city center. And the number 1 problem was that we've got tools of the spatial planning with the financial support. However, these are classical ones. We can get money only to pave the pedestrian zone again, or to train children who who fail at school. We can build structures that will have the climate of the area, but we don't have any subsidies or any process that will convert this territory as a for polyfunctional zone where people could live, because originally it was for trading and producing products 15 years ago. It takes 15 years until the zoning plan is changed, and which would be fatal for a place like this. So we created FONA, which is an experimental program in the Rhine-Westphal federal state, and we took it out of the system and invited many other players like the church, schools, the labor office, all the businesses, and together with them we created some sort of landscape where shopping was focused only in the dark green part, and the rest is a society which is learning how to deal with its own space. We built a senior citizens home. We built a new kindergarten. We built new residential structures, and it was built in such a way that people who live in the family houses on the suburbs of the city, old people, that they could actually move to the center where all the infrastructure is available and the younger generation can use their houses. And we hope this will start this circulation. Number 3, that's 2 successful ones, and 1 more is unsuccessful, being still an experiment. So this we try to find out how to respond to the energy crisis by changing the city according to the functionality and density. So we have a certain process of dwelling, 500 hectares in Berlin. It's quite large, and within those zoning plans, we try to identify opportunities for densifying, not only in the existing use, but also combination of functions. So where there is residence, we would add additional functions. And the advantage of this mixed use is that those functions can help each other energetically. So someone produces something that other can use. This was unsuccessful for the fact that we haven't reached the moment when we could, within the flexibility of those players that enter and exit the territory, that there will be a stable portion of energy that would supply the zone. If we succeed this, we could actually leave large investments in district heating and conversion of the energetic system as we have it today, if we want to respond to the energy crisis. So these were the 3 of my examples. And now it's time to Ladislava Zbiegczyk-Sucha, a representative of the department at the philosophical faculty of Masaryk University, and also the colleague who will be a teacher in the new teacher of the integrative planning, and she focuses on metrology of the research and design thinking. I want to underline this is because I'm curious what it is. And she's a co-author of the 100methods.cz project. So you asked about methods, so this might be one source. So Ladislava, thank you also very much. So I'm from the Department of Information Studies, so which is across the street actually. And I'm in charge of the program called Design of Information Services, which may look like being distant from the topic we are talking about today, but you already heard at the last panel that planning it doesn't have to be only about the space itself, but also the digital layer and additional layers. And this is something where we can contribute. So this study program is a mixture of students, lawyers, designers, clerks, who would like to introduce some changes in the society, and we are trying to provide methods for them and processes that would simplify it for them. I'm not going to talk about projects, but more about topics that we would like to introduce. So the number one is design thinking and research through design. And that's something I would like to present as sort of methods how to solve problems. These are examples of our project, which deals with navigation of patients inside hospitals. So if I ask you if you lost your way in a hospital, you probably know that feeling. And why I'm presenting this here, because we want to get included in the problem that exists for various groups of inhabitants.
Metody výzkumu, jako je třeba výzkum s pomocí eye trackingu, jak tady vidíte kolegu, který projíždí areálem nemocnice, a taky se snažíme navrhovat, prototypovat nějaké nové řešení, a proto je tam ten VR headset, kdy jsme třeba vytvořili digitální dvojče nemocnice a testovali jsme se všemi, protože testování v nemocnicích je hrozně náročné. Tak to si myslíme, to bych chtěla přinést takový jako set metod, přístupů, výzkumů k řešení problémů. Druhé téma, které přinášíme, tak jsou sociální inovace a participace. Jsou tady nějaké fotky z našich různých projektů, třeba z projektu, kdy jsme se snažili knihovnám pomoci v tom, aby přemysleli svoji roli v lokálních komunitách, aby nebyli už jenom ty poskytovatelé informací a knížek, ale aby byl nějaký prostor pro místní komunity, pro to, aby třeba mladí lidé dost často měli kde být a aby jim tam bylo příjemně, aby měli nějaké smysluplné trávení volného času. A ten druhý projekt je Bezbariérové Brno, kde jsme právě se snažili přidat smysluplně nějakou digitální vrstvu k tomu, jak zase může vypadat ta participace, jak se můžou posílat třeba podněty a jak může vypadat celý ten proces řešení podnětů potom v municipalitě. A třetí téma, který tady chceme přinést, tak jsou data smysluplné nebo srozumitelné předávání informací a vizualizace dat, protože si myslíme, že ta komunikace v rámci třeba plánování, které zahrnuje takové množství aktérů,
which has loads of players who speak different languages, so it's a great challenge. It's a lot of speaking different terms, language terms, translating them, searching for shared items. This is an example of a shared project where we collected data, or this example of our training product for visualization. So we are also interested in which way we think about data, how we use the data for future evaluation of future services, future spaces, how to increase imagination through various prototypes and other things that might help the public services in the future. Number three.
Prezentujícím je
Number three is Wojciech Womaczka, who is the head of the Department of Environment and Law at the legal faculty, and he deals with the public interest, environment, impact of structural projects on the environment, and so on. So I'm looking forward to the presentation. Thank you very much for the invitation, but this conference also speaks about newly opened study programs, because our faculty is going to open them. Why we are looking forward to those? Because if we keep the structure of the training or the education, but we want to focus on the new customers, so to speak, and we want to focus on something that we are interested in, and that's what I'm going to present in my examples, and we'll hopefully support this elasticity in thinking that lawyers sometimes lack, and we believe that this can be further extended to various researches. So if you look in the definition of the law, which says about the landscape and its spirit, but it doesn't say what is the landscape. It doesn't have to be listed. It's just generally protected. It doesn't tell you how you should balance various aspects within the landscape, what you should consider, what's acceptable, what is not, public and private interests and so on. So part of the law says that the ministry can accept various regulations within the law, but they never do it. So what is the protection of the landscape? And as there's been some time behind us, we know that the definition, where the limits are, how it's interlinked with other parts, where constructions can be erected. Typically, there is a judicature that reviews the decisions of various offices, as the offices don't have experts, and it's based on various feelings, opinions. It's like a jigsaw puzzle that we have to deal with anthropologists from France, Germany, and England. And you can see it easily on this in this English picture from 1821. It's Hayway. That's exactly that each clerk in England has it in his or her mind if to deal with the landscape. You might come up with a typical Czech painting, but we are talking about which is not actually defined exactly, but we have to deal with it. We have to describe it. There are very many terms like the spirit of the landscape. There are legal terms that are in the laws. They are applied, help us to improve the quality of the environment, whether it's the comfort of dwelling, the spirit of the landscape, or what is still acceptable and what is then architectural excess or weird ideas. So we are trying to create some sort of guidelines for the various offices, but by moving in time forward, we are mostly getting to what would be advisable or recommendable, and where there are bottlenecks in various systems where we would appreciate help from you, or at least a discussion.
If the state doesn't define what the landscape is, then it is giving it up to the regions. The regions are getting various regulations. The courts are abolishing them because they're saying this is illegal that you defined here. Or the regulation is very populist or absurd. For example, one of the cases that I solved, because I also worked at the court, and it's been 14 years, the Moravian Silesian region has drawn up its regulation, and they said we cannot forbid people to have wind power stations, and we will define at least some places which we want to protect and we don't want them. And then there's another map, and that's the regular site. And you have to see all of these places. But the viewpoints only define an average man, not a woman who's not high enough, not tall enough, perhaps. Of course, it was abolished by the court because otherwise you wouldn't be able to build anything. But 2010, 2014, 23, there were different regulatives which were not actually acceptable. And we're trying to cover the holes, but also realize where to go. A more advanced level is the area of different expectations or requirements. So, for example, EIA examines the influence on the landscape, the only EU legislation, but you can also monitor the influence on cultural heritage. What is your plan of cultural heritage? No one will tell you, because in practice it doesn't really happen. And then we're looking for other approaches in other countries, and we're trying to look for methodologies, etc. The same thing, if you have green infrastructure, everyone could think what they, think about what it is. But when we look into the law, many countries have some sort of different definitions. They take EU money, but then they have different definitions, and somewhere it works and somewhere it doesn't. So right now, we are in a sort of freestyle time where we're looking for topics that we see as useful or important, and we're trying to discuss them with experts, sociologists, anthropologists, but also architects, builders, etc. So regardless whether we'll see you in September or at another conference, I'll be very glad if you perhaps give us some feedback on our plans, and I will be looking at and listening to what the other experts are speaking about. The fourth guest is Viktoria Mravčáková, who's an architect and also works at the Secondary School of Applied Arts, and also part of a group, a collective of sociologists, female sociologists and female architects from different studios in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and she will also introduce her experience. Hello. A lot has been already said. We're trying to explore the methodology of sociological research and link it with architecture and urban planning and everything in between. It's also activism in a way, because we started with various projects that we initiated ourselves, which were very strongly focused on feminism, and it definitely, I hope it's reflected in the work. I will present 4 projects that sort of defines various methods of our work. So we're trying to reflect about various processes and methods and forms which enables people to be involved in urban planning. In this case, this was a project initiated by a gallery with local municipalities in Ústí nad Labem, and they wanted to protect one specific brutalist building from being demolished. And we wanted to explore the possibilities of reshaping the building. The panels show the process, and all of the orange circles are those that are failures. As we've heard today, one has to learn from failures as well. And you have to be flexible, because not always everything goes according to plan. In our topics and our projects, we try to look at areas such as care, everyday agency of various users. This particular project was a research project at a biennale. We tried to look at concrete slab houses and at their everyday use to see how people use these defined structures today, how they use the common spaces which were planned as some sort of infrastructure, and how do they create various systems of care for the space. So this was a sociological type of research, rather, through conversations, questionnaires, and photographs. And later on, it was applied in a text. What's also interesting is that the capacities of people turned out to be something important, because the greatest finding of the project was that those architects who work and design buildings relinquish them at some point, but they should perhaps be involved in shaping the functions eventually, because each You probably know it. Each house creates its infrastructure anew. Another project was a project called Muses Plus, where we tried to infiltrate a traditional muses, which is the local system of environmental stability, and bring it closer to integrated planning through participation. The post-socialist context that we are living now comes with a certain distrust to the planning institutions and processes. And constantly we have to sort of reinvent the methods that are coming from Western countries and the tools we've heard about today already. So it wasn't certainly easy to really address the people. So we really had to design this cycle rickshaw that would come to everyone almost to their house and create the space for this introduction. And I think education, last but not least, is a key to carrying out some change in spatial planning. And we are trying to bring it into practice by organizing a summer school and publishing the outcome, such as peer-to-peer education and other methods, interdisciplinary methods, etc. And yes, that's about as much as I could say in introduction. Thank you, Victoria. And in conclusion, Radek Toman, this time without his dog. He's our colleague from the Faculty of Architecture, the Vice Dean for External Relations, but especially one of the teachers with great experience in cooperating in international and multi-area teams and cooperation. So I would like to ask him for a short summary of his activity. Good afternoon. I'll just jump straight into the project. So this is one of our research projects from last year. It's a publication called Undercover. These are two books that we published with our students. I'll send them through the audience, but please return them to me. This publication researched Brno cultural scene. We focused especially on independent cultural scene, but even the official ones, it's sometimes difficult to divide them. So this was a research that came out during one semester of 12 weeks. It's based on research and conversations with various actors and representatives of the Brno cultural scene. And basically, it presents independent and dependent culture and how it influences municipal space and identity. The research was followed by diploma theses of various students, but we can just skip that. But still today, these project theses should be exhibited in Urban Centrum. So if you're interested, you can see them. Today's the last day. This book was followed up by another book called Presence, that focuses on the district of Old Brno, because we thought that Old Brno was very interesting. It's a city district which includes almost all typologies and forms of the city that we have on a very small space, be it old tenement houses abandoned factories, concrete blocks on only a few square kilometers. Moreover, there are many empty plots from the bombing in 1944, and they were still not built up to this day. There's an unfinished conversion from the 1960s, and that's still unfinished, and then some other parts, a district which is constantly in rebirth. And we use the same methodology to research the city. And again, we had conversations with various actors of public life, be it developers, artists. Professor Kyselka, who was born in Old Brno, and he remembers even the river flowing through the square and people fishing for carp right in the middle of the square. And many other conversations with various actors, various stakeholders. So this was quick research in the area through participation, monitoring, and conversations. And again, it was worked on within one semester, 12 weeks, and now the students are working through the content and producing the results. And this is another project from last year. This was a workshop This workshop took place in Warsaw with the participation of the School of Architecture from Kharkiv in Ukraine and the School of Architecture from Warsaw. And our faculty was represented by Monika Konrad and myself, Alex Bykov, our teacher who's originally from Ukraine. And our students and PhD students. During that year, we focused on the post-war renewal of Odessa. We looked at it from 4 different perspectives and scales. One scale was the whole coastline. The second was the city. The third, a district, and the fourth, a house. I worked with a group that focused on a home, and this is our output. We had questionnaires that we sent to people in Odessa where we asked them, how did they live before the war? How did the war influence their life? Do they have a dream? Or how do they imagine their housing in the future? What are their dreams regarding housing? And so we collected many, many stories.
Then we were thinking about how to process them. And we have realized that we are not able to create a universal architectural design, but we created something like a spatial manifesto. It was a tent, which on one side represented Odessa and the destruction of the city during the war, and the other side, inside, created the personal tragedies of individuals, where there are written various stories of the respondents who answered our questionnaire. And I forgot to say that this workshop ran in parallel in Lviv and Warsaw, where there's this Faculty of Architecture, and the students who who were men, males, were not allowed to travel to Warsaw. So the second part of the tent, which is white, was created by the students in Lvov and at the exhibition in Warsaw, where I wasn't there, but those two parts were put together and created the tent. And that might be all from me. I heard that now this setting is in Paris, but it's living on its own life outside of us. Thank you very much. I leave the picture here on because it's a strong one. I had numerous questions prepared, but I would prefer giving the space to you. But before we do that, I would like to summarize that today's event is a little bit like this meeting, a parents' day at school, where teachers and parents can talk. Because the majority of people who presented here are people that we might meet during our studies. And that's something that I find really interesting, to discuss things with people like that. So I leave my questions here, and I can leave them, and you can interact between the stage and the auditorium. The only thing that came to mind, I would be interested how to do discursive planning, which was one of the first slides of today. How to do it if planning itself has many stickers, like too slow from the development point of view, and it's unjust, and this so and so. So I had a question for Wojciech Womaczka, how to include those that are to do with the law, how to include them with other actors or stakeholders. And the discussion is sort of direct democracy and representatives of this and that. We can enter it as representatives of other disciplines. And I'm curious how to research this within the study program. When it comes to Vladka, what about the methods of the design thinking? Which methods are transferable to other disciplines, for architects, urban planners, those that see that things are problematic? They have to have a perception of social and environmental. And by this, I'm getting to the limits, like where is this interdisciplinarity open for everybody, and where are there limits? When it comes to Radek, how can you create a book with students within 12 weeks? That's fascinating. Whom have I forgotten? Victoria? Probably from a practical point of view, how to do it so that the communities and other stakeholders want what you produce. So these are ideas for questions, but it's up to you anyway. We've got, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes, and there is, I think, toast prepared, wine and juice. And I'll step down and will be glad that if you raise your questions and open other topics. Thank you very much for all your presentations. They were very inspiring. Let me ask you, the new study subject is a combination of various movements, and me as a student, I can see that we have a tendency to leave the school, to graduate and say, I am a landscape architect, I am an architect. And also the employers search for particular professions. And this multidisciplinarity seems to be very attractive to me, but it's hard to say whether studios and companies, businesses are ready for this. So thinking about the future, how to approach it, how to take it, how to present yourself, because it seems to me that now I will be an expert in everything, but only partially. And at the same time, I will not be a deep expert in anything. So how do you work with this, that you keep learning without having or bearing the tech that you are this or that, you are X or Y? Excellent question for the end of the day. I leave it up to you. I'm not going to answer that. Let me start. Thank you very much for the question, because it's very important, not only for this open discipline, but also for the spatial planning. We are talking about interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity, and frequently I feel that we wish for that, but we don't know what to do with it. And it's also the fact that when those disciplines become parts of the same group, they do not tolerate each other. So what's the role of a spatial planner? I believe that there are two levels. One of them is the moderative one, which means that the question is how to combine all those specialists or all the expertise that is not only based on education, skills and qualification, but they are somehow caught in a silo, so-called silo, of their possibilities. If something doesn't fit something somewhere, it's not that people don't want to, but the reason is that they have to play a role, and from that point of view, they are right. And I believe that an important part of the qualification in the spatial planning is to moderate all those silos together so that they can work together, or they can work more quickly and reach the goal. And number two, actually, there are two more points, but I will be brief. One point is the qualification itself. It's not the point that we can do everything a little bit, be jack of all trades and master of none, but we have to be anchored in something. In Germany, it's much easier. There is a discipline called spatial planning, and our students actually can go to NGOs, to communities, businesses, developers, for the fact that they can not only moderate, but they know their way through the Building Act, they can understand the social analysis, they can work with data, and I hope that at least to a certain extent they are also able to plan. So you are from the Faculty of Architecture, you are probably better at designing than our students in Germany. And not all spatial planners can do everything, but each of them should have a core of his or her strength, and it comes from one discipline, geography or architecture or the legal education, and this is what they bring to the market with their ability to moderate. So it's my appeal to you and actually to us as well to understand each other and try to overcome those silos of specialization. And number three, our task is not only to understand those silos and jump from one to another, but to also create new ones or destroy the old ones, or to the boundaries that we actually create for ourselves through the politics and spatial planning and by being citizens and having our rights and properties. So overcome these boundaries, that's our task. And that means that we have to be strong enough to change the system and to develop it further. Anything that you would like to add to that? Perhaps I'd like to add a comment. It's very much based on skills than disciplines, as I see it. And the point is how you identify yourself. This study program is the master's level program, so it's based on your bachelor studies and further develops them. And it's been mentioned that sometimes we are too slow. Sometimes it's not a bad thing, because sometimes when things are too speedy, they don't go in the right direction. But what we want to speed up, that once you enter the practice is much more interdisciplinary than the discipline that you study, or what I studied or my colleagues did. You graduate from the university and spend 10 years searching for the right teams, and you end up being in a team which is interdisciplinary. Mio Drago mentioned that you have to solve comprehensive tasks where there are 25 people participating. They represent different professions. You do your own profession, but it doesn't mean that you would have other counterparts. And by defining those disciplines, we try to speed it up. If we succeed, that you as graduates already have only the knowledge how people work with the different disciplines and how they understand their positions, but then the ability to communicate with the other disciplines is the part of your education, of part of your skills, and that might be the meaning. So if you graduate as an urban planner or architect, you will be an architect with a planning skill set and the same skill set of how to communicate with social aspects, how to collect data, and how to think about designing of other aspects, not only spaces, and how to also bring in certain legal knowledge. So it doesn't mean that you are a lawyer and we don't need lawyers, but this is how I see the interdisciplinarity, because we are aware of this, and this question you asked is very important. So thank you very much for it. So again, microphone is here for further questions.
Thank you. I'd also like to ask, because several times we've heard that it doesn't only concern urban planning or spatial planning studies, but also a new perspective, such as changing even spatial planning itself from zone planning to something else. And we have people who know a lot about it on the stage. So my question is there any transformation actually happening? Or are these just sort of small sparks only for now? I'll be very specific and focus on the legal aspects. 6 to 7 years ago, the new construction law was being prepared, and another one is being discussed now. So you can tell quite clearly what we've heard, that the older generation and older style of thinking had the tendency to keep them as they are. It's been done for 50 years. Don't change it. The change in 6 years is huge, though. The pressure is from the bottom. Do something about it. People have changed even at the ministry, but at the city levels. And even the expertise from abroad comes into the picture. So all of a sudden, someone else is deciding. Your counterparts, well, but perhaps not the decisive ones, but there are people who are of the same age in the workplaces, so the thinking is already a bit different. So that the new type of law is really different, and the law that really prefers the developers, etc., but it strengthens spatial planning, actually, because if we say that the specialized bodies will be able to say what they want, but ultimately it goes to the to the building authorities, and so the viewpoint will change, and it will lead to optimizing spatial planning and better examples. And when things are done very fast, you would be surprised how many politicians hear how it's done in Poland, how it's done in Austria, how it's done in Germany, etc. And so I'm very glad about these examples that you've heard, because if you show someone, you have a great chance that it will resonate, that it will be heard. So from a legal point of view, yes, definitely this will change, and this will radically change. I'd just like to add that not only the ministry changes, but it changes again. So even this situation is fluid, I'd say, on a political level, on an administrative level, perhaps on a lower level, on a municipal level. I used to work at the City Planning Institute in Prague, and it's linked with the previous question. The role of the person, we were doing precisely what you would be studying or what you'd be learning. We were negotiating, we were creating briefs, we were leading huge multi-stakeholder groups, and it was already pointing out to the change that is already happening on the public space projects, which are multidisciplinary by default. And this is the experience, and it's happening through the different levels. So I think you have the experience to learn it already while studying, and not 10 years on the go, on the job, as we've done that. Any further questions?
But I think this question was really relevant, and maybe, Jan, because you grew up and raised here and, let's say, working in Germany, because what I realized that, because in Germany, the role of an urban planner or a spatial planner also had, a spatial planner was always existing, but the urban planning not so much. But the Städtebauförderung really changed quite something. So does something like that maybe help here as well? Because what I really see, I don't know the Czech system, I know it much more in ex-Yugoslavia, but kind of there I faced, let's say, plans that were just written text. No spatial kind of plan, nothing. They were copy-paste for the completely different regions, and they had nothing to do with the existence of the spatial kind of conditions, which was shocking. So, but I think climate change, let's say, really helps in that respect. And what kind of procedures or mechanisms or maybe fundings on a certain level could support kind of the acceleration of this process?
Yeah, very good question.
Maybe just to reflect that later on, but I think there is really an issue kind of that could be quicker.
Yeah, well, yeah. So let's put it this way. Česky, pardon.
Yes.
Česky.
All right, I'll answer in Czech. I'll try. For the context, the German law really has lots of money, billions, into the Bundesländer, leading to spatial planning and mostly renewal of cities, but also the development, which means that it's really a central task, and the funding is really divided. And I think 70% of my graduates are not working in spatial planning of a newly developed area, but they are rather working for cities into projects and redevelopment projects. And for those 25 years, I've been doing the same. We've been preparing documentation for spatial planning that is then reflected by using this money in the area. The various subsidies are linked with the question of acceleration of all this transformation. The subsidies have really changed in 2021, when 12 different subsidy titles were reduced to 3. So the little glasses, which were standing next to each other, were poured into 3 big buckets. And they were called the development of centers, the development of cities and municipalities, and then social programs. Which is actually old wine in new kegs or barrels. But the advantage here being that the cooperation between the individual topics has really been facilitated. So if I really want to play the piano, I can use all the different stops. And this really accelerates the administration of all these subsidy titles, which means that the cities can really react much faster and much stronger than they used to before. But, of course, there are still some limitations. And these are the same in Germany as well as here. We have subsidies, but the cities do not have the people to actually process these programs. There are probably insufficient number of people at the building authorities, which is one of the key problems of this acceleration. And we have the same thing, because the municipalities, where they're getting more rights, but they don't have enough budget and personnel to be able to react to these programs. The last thing to say regarding the climate. The climate is a key game changer here, because there is no reaction of the cities going top down. I identify a problem, I take money, I repair something, and it works, such as a bridge. But you need to cooperate with the citizens, because they will be sorting waste differently, they will be heating differently, they will be moving differently, not by car, but on a bicycle. And the question for spatial planning and subsidies and legal base, the question is now, in what way am I able to capture this in a strategic outlook? How should I mobilize it and reflect it in the direction that I need from a strategic point of view? In the end, I'd like to involve Laďka and Radek. We've had questions from potential students or current students at the faculty. So what sort of profession is it, the spatial planner? Because in Austria and Germany, there are faculties of architecture and spatial planning, whereas here we just have faculties of architecture. And the result of the graduate is not to draw up the spatial plan for the 30 years into the future. We don't know what the product of your work should be or will be. Perhaps it doesn't exist yet, for now. But I think this is the key aspect for the perspective where we are at now. And looking at Laďka, she showed us the 100 methods, the project. I'm just wondering whether what we're talking about here, whether there is a set of tools or methods that could be replicated and used in various contexts. And the task of the work is to create a method that would be custom-made to the given project, to the given context, to design not just the output, but to design the process, including the methods of the working methods. It's many topics that you've addressed, and I'll try to connect them. My experience in multifaceted program is where 100% of students are working, and during these 4 years of this program, during these 3 years where they've been working, they're creating new positions. I mean, even that is doing something. And very often they work in a company, in a corporate company or in a public authority, and during that time they design a new role for themselves. So yes, the methods can be used. They are based on design, they are based on architecture, and we took these areas for the social science in order to apply and return and prototype the solutions. But it can be applied. I can apply them on myself, actually, on my life, on my job and its definition. And Radek, how do you develop new methods in your projects? How do you use the experience? You've replicated a method on a book. Well, yes, you adapt a little, always, because the topic is slightly different, the area is slightly different, you have a different team of people. So it always adjusts a little. And I think these two books, one is held by Mr. Havlish. So when you look at it, you can tell that it was produced by different people. So it also depends on what type of people you work with. And even that is a factor. So you can never replicate something 100%. Perhaps I'd like to say something also about the in the interdisciplinarity. Our students are interdisciplinary already. And the students who are very open in their thinking, then have a crisis when they leave the faculty and they have to look for their path. They have to find their path. Because the task of the faculty is to open the scope to the students, open their eyes, broaden their horizons. And then it depends what they do with all of that once they graduate. Because some actually look for their purpose, for their calling, 4 years, 5 years after graduation. Most of them don't leave knowing that that's what they want to be doing for the next 50 years. Most of them don't. And those who do get stuck and in 20 to 30 years have the crisis of their own. So one really needs to find their path and create their position. And it's perhaps tough at the start, but then ultimately it leads to a situation where they are all the more satisfied and successful in their position 20, 30 years down the road. Another thing that I thought of is that one thing that is often forgotten is aesthetics. The everyday aesthetics that we experience, and the aesthetics of planning also. The change does not concern only the tools, but also the trends, what people perceive as aesthetic, what makes them happy. And I think this also is included in the job, creating the narratives of aesthetic, of everyday aesthetic, what we try to do through our projects. And that's connected with creating new roles.
Thank you very much. So let me close the discussion. Thank you very much, all our guests. So big hand for them. So let me close this program. So if you're interested in the new study programs, look at or check the website of the faculty. And if you're here and want to ask further questions, we are open until the end of April for applications for studies. And if you are too young for that, you can register or apply next year or after several years. So thank you again to everybody who participated, whether you are local or from abroad. So we'll see each other at the faculty or somewhere else. And there's a toast prepared outside the hall, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic version.
You and probably people that are watching us, we will still organize sort of question-answers sessions. So if you will be interested to join and to apply, there will be a possibility to ask more questions. Thank you very much.